You're listening to There's a Lesson in Here Somewhere, a podcast featuring compelling conversations with exceptional people. Whether it's an inspirational achievement, a hardship overcome, or simply a unique perspective, these are stories we can all learn from. Here are your hosts, Jamie Serino and Carlos Arcila.
Hi, and thanks everyone for joining us. I'm Jamie Serino.
And I'm Carlos Arcila.
And this is There's a Lesson in Here Somewhere. We're here today with Jen Ketchens, and Jen is a DEI expert and practitioner. I met Jen actually when she was a procurement specialist, and I'll tell you, she was a badass. Okay, you did not want to be on the other side of the table as Jen. I was on her side of the table, so I enjoyed watching her work. And then she transitioned from that position to getting into DEI, which was also a pleasure for me to watch. And then Jen and I stayed in touch. She's gone on to develop her own consultancy, and we're going to talk to Jen about her experiences both in working life and transitioning to a new role and developing the consultancy, and really more importantly, working in DEI and what that entails. So Jen, I'll turn it over to you, and you could probably do a little bit of a better introduction than me, and you could tell everyone a little bit about yourself.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you, Jamie. Thank you, Carlos. So yes, Jennifer Ketchens. I go by Jen. I am, it's interesting because I am a supply chain executive. I have over 25 years of experience leading global organizations through like supply chain transformations, procurement strategy, operations, ERP technology, and supplier diversity. Recently, I've kind of moved lanes, and now I also offer over 3 years of DEI experience as an executive, really focusing on leading global diversity, equity, and inclusion strategies, focusing on DEI programs, all those programs that are regarding like recruiting, retention, progression, performance, all of those things that really prioritize exclusive initiatives, globally for companies. So I know that's a mouthful, and but actually, it's actually fun, and it all kind of blends together. I do have a new company that I started late last year. It's called Emergence Consulting. It's a consulting firm, and we offer our services specializing in strategy and execution plans. That strategy is, of course, within diversity and inclusion, as well as procurement operations. We do a little bit of business transformation. We have a team of experts that really focus with our clients to provide comprehensive solutions to meet their needs. And we really focus on the small startup companies that are looking to start their organizations with a framework and a foundation in diversity and inclusion. So that seems to be the niche for this organization, but we are available for larger companies as well, especially for like strategies for supplier diversity programs. How do you get them started? Maybe you need a business case in order to understand really what it brings to the organizations. We're able to do those things and provide you with templates. So that's my new thing that I'm doing now, which keeps me really busy with the clients that we have that are looking for that assistance for DEI as well as for procurement, but mostly DEI.
That's great. That's great that you're able to blend the two things. Maybe we can start with that transition that you made in your career. If you could tell us a little bit about what that was like, and what maybe you were worried about, the pros and the cons, and what drew you to do that, and your whole experience there with that.
Yeah, I love that. And that's like the question everyone starts with. It's like, how do you go from supply chain to DEI? It's just not the same. which it actually is, because supply chain have the marketing piece of it, the marketplace piece of it, where you have the supplier diversity programs. So in my career, either my team worked closely with the supplier diversity program, or that program rolled into my organization. So it just kind of depend on the position I had at the time. So diversity is a huge passion for me, not only for the supplier side of it, but also for my internal teams as well. Just ensuring that I have the right look and feel of employees that are working for me. I think about, hiring, 19, 20 people at a time. I really focus on diversity, and I always have been, right? And a lot of it is because of where I come from. Being in procurement, procurement is a very, I want to say it's led by men, right? And most of the men are, white men, that it's really hard to get into procurement and excel in your career and grow into that type of career because of the dominance of the male person in there. And as Jamie said before, for procurement, you have to have different skill sets. You have to be really aggressive. You have to, be really a tenacious negotiator. And how do you make sure that you are spending the company's money the correct way and things of that nature? So a little bit of the soft skills are not there because you have to be hard all the time. So being in that world was really easy for me for some reason. And it's a part of, maybe it's like my personality or something like that. But I went into my last position to build the organization, to build the procurement organization. And there I was able to use like all of my strengths that I have in my experience to do that. And it was during a time that in 2020, where we went through this huge, drastic, monumental experience, that I started to look at moving from supply chain into diversity. So when you think about it, like DEI has been a practice, has been a part of corporate America for decades, and when you look at the roots of DEI, it goes back to like civil rights, and also the 1960s, when they had a lot of anti-discrimination legislation that happened in the US. Until recently, we would hear DEI every now and then, right? So Jamie, you and I were at our company before I became the CDO, and we really wasn't talking about DEI. It was something that's more of a nice to have instead of something that's a priority, or it's a corporate, strategy for an organization. So knowing that that's the case, I've never thought about going into that field. But in spring of 2020, immediately there was a drastic change, right? Right after George Floyd murder and the rise of the Black Lives Matter movement, spring of 2020 was really a turning point to fight for racial justice on a global scale. Now that movement became like the catalyst of a greater awareness, right? Education and action on DEI, which pushed a massive push for companies and corporations to take more of a moral and financial stand on DEI. So even at the company that we were with, we started to see a change in how our executive and our board really started to look at DEI and to make sure that we were focused on it. Now, at the company, I had already implemented a diversity supplier program, but that wasn't enough, right? It was like more of a calling, because your customers and your employees were voicing their opinions and their preferences regarding companies to publicly commit to DEI, as well as to ensure that, they were demanding broader investments and resources for the journey. So with that, hence the introduction to a large number of new chief diversity officers. And I became a part of that, part of that kind of strategy and as part of that approach. Now, with that, being the new chief diversity officer, we were hired to create strategies and goals and methodology, and also to, execute plans of DEI. Now, those executions, of course, were like to install, fix, enhance, or maybe mask DEI programs within corporate America. So my story was born there, and my why for that was really, I was so moved by the movement. I was
Yeah.
so thrilled to have that opportunity to be like the CDO of the organization. Even though I had a successful career position at successful procurement career at the company, the challenge to make a difference was a big deal for me.
Yeah.
So not only, when I think about the company, but it was like a global movement and it felt bigger than me. And I finally felt like I could take all the strengths and expertise that I have built in the past 25 years to build out something for the organization that will inspire people, not only like the people that work there at the company, but also new people and our clients and also my family. It's just something that big that was happening outside of your organization. You want to be a part of it. At the time, you see a lot of people walk in and they're protesting and everyone's out there, with their signs. And, it was during the pandemic. So how do you do that when you don't want to be like around people with, your mask on and things like that? And I felt like being the CDO and really driving a strategy that's going to impact the company was my way of being a part of that movement. And it's like you spend so much time at work, right? I've spent like 60 hours with Jamie, on campaigns and things like that. But no matter what I was doing at work, my kids wasn't really proud of that. Even in my heydays where, I did a procurement negotiation for $100 million contract, multi-year contract with rebates and volume price breaks and training hours for the team. My kids wasn't surprised, it wasn't impressed with that.
Right.
But when I became the CDO and I'm negotiating with nonprofit organizations that fight for human rights and civil rights, or when I created the employee resource groups for, the LGBTQ community, promoting inclusion and belonging. Now that's something to be proud of. And that's something that they were like, yeah, Mom, that's great. So it really, for me, it was about the why. And I really believed my company, I really believed in this new change and the commitment. So I wanted to take that on.
Yeah, and question when people think of like diversity, they always think of maybe is it a racial, is it female, male? Like there's more in that when it comes to diversity, right? Like diverse thought. There's different ways of bringing diversity into the organization. Like, can you maybe expand upon like the diversity, and then what does an organization benefit from in having a diverse workforce?
Oh, I love that question. And diversity is interesting because it's a large, it's a really big definition, right? So you have to, I think one of the challenges for me was to really define diversity. And it's not up to like the DEI expert or specialist. It has to be the company, right? You have to sit with the executives and decide, what is diversity? How do we get our company and our executives behind diversity? And how do we make sure that however we define it, that it's supported, it's something that we can track, and it's something that will get us to what our end game is for the organization. So when you think about not just defining diversity, but also measurements, there are 3 components for DEI. Inclusion is the hardest to measure and to track. And that's the one that really matters, you know? It's like, I'll give you my thoughts on diversity and what I believe is like the right thing. But I think when you in a position and you're looking at, executives and they're looking at you and say, okay, how are we going to measure this? What are we measuring? Why does these things matter? So the hardest thing to track is inclusion. For diversity, you can track race, you can track gender and age. Very easy. That's information that's provided by the employees, but something that we can track, right? For equity, you can track outcomes and performance and compensation. That's something that based on HR and the things that we have in HRIS system, we're able to track that and be able to kind of measure those things. But measured inclusion is like, how do you feel? Are you safe at work? Are you supported at work? Are you valued at work? Do you really belong there? Those are all those things that is really hard to figure that out. And then for that piece of it, after you define diversity, you have to make sure that that's a part of your engagement for your employees. And it's a part of your surveys to make sure that people that they know as leaders, we understand that feelings are important, right? And then we want to make sure we're asking the right questions. So back to definition of diversity, first you start with gender, between males, females, those things are first. The second piece, it goes into race and ethnicity. Those are things that you can measure and you can track, especially if employees feel comfortable with giving that information. Because right now, still, even in 2023, some employees don't know what companies are doing with that data. Are you going to take that data and use it against me? Are you taking that data to, implement a program that is for someone that's on a different ethnicity than I am? Is it going to harm me? But until then, that's why I brought up about the inclusion piece, because it's so important. If you don't feel safe, then you're not going to give the data. Then the company will never, get and execute on any of those goals, any of those things that they're trying to change. You won't see any change because employees won't give you that data.
Yeah.
Really important for the definition as well as the measurements.
Yeah, oftentimes some employees get the post survey, whether it's from a Gallup or some other organization, and there's almost like one side of it is, do I answer this honestly, or do I answer how the company wants me to answer it? And it's always challenging to get those the truth out from employees. How do you overcome that?
And I was, as you were saying that, in my mind, I was thinking, as a DEI leader, I received a lot of emails to say, hey, Jen, is this really anonymous? Can I be honest? And I really believe that honesty depends on your leader. So if you have a leader and you trust that leader supports you, that leader provides a safe space for you to grow, to develop, to make, decisions, whether you make a bad decision or you make a good decision, to give you that kind of decision rights, to take a risk. You're never going to grow if you're not able to take those risks. Now, if you're in a position like that, then that survey is easy for you to fill out and you're not going to question. But if you're not in a position like that and you don't feel safe at work and you don't feel support or value and you don't have a great relationship with your leader, then you're never going to be honest on that survey.
Yeah.
Because you're thinking, oh my God, if my leader find out that I'm going to give the company a 3 instead of a 10, then I'm going to, have some type of backlash on me or some type of retaliation. And that matters, and that's one of the reasons why DEI is so important, because if you have employees that don't feel like thoughts and their opinion matters, then you're never going to have a great DEI outcome. You know, it's not going to be there because you're not comfortable, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's reminding me a little bit, this notion of locus of control and locus of responsibility. And it was brought up by Daryl Wing Sue in the 70s, actually, and it was in relationship to like counselors and therapists. And the idea behind it was to try to get into the mindset of the people that you're trying to help. But I think that it can also be used by corporations, right? So in his paper, he was saying that Americans tend to have a very high locus of control and a high locus of responsibility. And what that means is that they feel that they are in control of their lives and they feel that they are responsible for changing things. And people from other countries, depending on their forms of government or the socioeconomic standing, might feel that they don't have as much control. Other people control their lives. They don't have as much responsibility. Like, I can't impact what's going to happen here. And I think it can directly be used for corporations too, where I think senior management sometimes is baffled by the fact that maybe entry-level people don't feel the wherewithal to go out and just go and do something. They are constantly asking for permission. Or if a person from a certain race or a person from another country, if it's an international corporation, they're not understanding that they might be behaving differently. And it's because they have a completely different mindset. And so if your locus of control is lower because of maybe the neighborhood you grew up in or the country you grew up in or the type of life that you had, then what's going to happen is then the company does need to invest more in trying to gain that trust and trying to instill that into people. And the same with locus of responsibility, that if the company is constantly directing things and not letting people take responsibility, then they're not going to pick up and take that responsibility. So I was just thinking through that a little bit. And I think the idea of trying to get into the mindset of different people in the company ends up being really important. And how does one do that, especially when there might be thousands of people, when they might be so many different backgrounds and even different countries? How do you factor all of that in?
Well, it's really tough. You know, this job for DEI is not for the weak, right? It is definitely not for the weak, because you have all of those different components to it, you know, and you have, you know, thousands, you know, at the last company that we were at, it's almost 10,000 people.
Mhm.
How do you ensure that 10,000 people feel safe, supported, valued, counted, you know, all of those great fuzzy feeling things that comes with this work? And it's hard. It's hard. And, you know, you have to have a pulse on the employees that are working for you. You have to make sure that you are, you know, speaking to them not only in those surveys, but also have these connection groups, these ERGs, the business you know, the BRGs, the business resource groups, the networking. You want to make sure that there's programs that, you know, are pushing, and I don't want to say pushing, but programs that are supporting your goals for these people. First off, you have to have a goal for the people.
Right, right.
So when you think about it, it's like, you know, like you said, Jimmy's like, you have all these thousands of people with these different thoughts and these different mindsets. You have to somehow put them in different buckets, you know, and they do that. You know, HR does that all the time. You know, you have, you know, people come in and they put you in the bucket, but you have to make sure that you're not putting them in buckets for just the reason because they're similar in color or similar in, you know, gender, or similar in anything that's inclusive, like LGBTQs or LGBTQ community, or you know, people that are older, you know, and the age groups are different, you know, for a company and being in the CDO position and really looking at the company, there's so many political things that happen in the back end, you know, really understanding privacy and how can you keep some, you know, data and how can you bucket people. But there's a way to do it, you know, that helps with the employees and their safety, right? So there's a way to kind of have the pulse on them to understand it and then create programs and spaces for them in an effort for them to feel that way. So then you don't have this, you know, you can kind of take the mass of, you know, thousands of employees that have these different thoughts and need to feel a certain type of way in an effort for them to be successful within their position, just to make sure that person that's in charge of the belonging and the inclusion space of it, they're actually looking at the people, having that pulse, understanding what they feel and what they think, and trying to create the right programs that will help them in the long run, which is tough. You know, DEI is definitely, it's a tough space because it's not easy, you know, and I think about procurement where, you know, my entire, you know, 12 months was focused on savings. And, you know, it's easy to know savings. Like if I'm spending 100 million and I need to save, you know, 100,000, but with DEI, you can't do that. You know, you can say, hey, I want to focus on representation, you know, at a different level. But what does that mean? You know, and how do you ensure that you get that representation if you don't have people, if you don't have your pulse on the people that's in the company internally that can be in that position? You know, are there programs to help people that are right at the level to go to the next level? You know, those things you don't, you know, it's kind of tough to figure that out. And then you also have to understand what type of company you're working for. You know, that is so important. And I have so many lessons learned, not only from the company that I worked for, but also from the companies that, you know, I'm working with as a consultant. You know, it's interesting because I know this is kind of going off on the question, but there's companies out there that really want to be involved in DEI. They want DEI for their company, but they don't know how to do it. And they don't know if DEI is really something that is real, you know? They don't want to invest in a person to come in and lead something before they have data that they absolutely need it. And that piece of it is really interesting because if you go in, I think going in as and being an executive and being in charge of a company is totally different than coming in as a consultant. You know, as a consultant, I get to hear how they really feel, you know, like, oh, you really feel like that. And then we have these difficult conversations, but I think they're willing to have those conversations with me because I'm not a part of the team. Do you know what I mean? And you're able to really some honesty because there's some leaders out there that are really honest. They're like, yeah, this is something that everyone need and everyone want to do, but do we really, let's start with, do we really need to do it? And then if we do, how do we do it without, you know, impacting other people that are not a part of the DEI movement? You know, because you have to think about, there's programs that should be created in every organization that everyone should have access to, you know, and I think what makes me different from a lot of DEI practitioners is that I believe in equity first. I don't believe in diversity first. I believe that if your company is an equitable company, then everyone would have the same opportunities, you know? And that
Yeah.
should be the first thing. Like, I
Mm.
shouldn't be a white male and I can't be a part of a management program. That's not right, you know? So if we have these programs that are equitable, then you can have a DEI person to come in and say, hey, we have this program, and now we want to make sure that it's equitable across the different ethnicities and the different genders, right? And then make sure that that piece of it is there.
Yeah.
But you first have to have a consistent, equitable experience. And I'm really for that because I think
Mhm.
you shouldn't need DEI if you're doing that the right way, you know?
And Jen, do you find that there's a difference in terms of goals between maybe an established larger organization and let's say a startup? And how do you address like their goals and based on the differences, right? Like, would a startup look for X? Would a large organization look for Y? And how do you get to X? How do you get to Y?
Yeah, Carlos, that's a great question because I don't think it depends on startup versus mature,
Mm,
right? It really depends on the leadership. And I've never thought of it that way. And so I became a leader, right?
mm,
So leadership is so important, and having DEI come from the top down is so important,
yeah.
right? Because once it once you're trying to find DEI in the middle of an organization, which it should be, we can talk about like managers, middle managers, right? Middle managers are hiring more people than an executive, right? Our CEO may get to hire 2 people within 3 years because that turnaround is not, you know, there at that
Yeah.
level, right? Usually it's not there unless something is wrong with the company, right? But they don't have that opportunity to change the makeup of the organization. They do have the opportunity to change the representation at the top, right? So we do have to make sure that we put the ownership on them and make them accountable for that.
Mm,
But really, if you look at companies, companies are made in the middle, right? And those middle level managers are so important because they're hiring people
mm,
constantly, you know? And if you think about how do you create the culture, right? How do you make sure that you're having a movement of DEI goals and, you know, progress that you're looking for, whether your goal is to hire more, Latinos in the organization, or is it to hire more, Black Americans in the organization, whatever the goals
mm.
are, you have to get to that middle level because they're in control of that. And those middle level leaders, are they inclusive? Do they have an inclusive mindset? Do they understand that? Right? Do they understand that they kind of hold the keys not only to DEI, but also to culture? And until a company connects DEI and culture together, then you're not going to be successful because it's there. It's like that's how you get people in the door. And then once you have them in the door, you retain them and you grow them, and then they're able to move up, and then they are part of your representation because they're part of your leadership, and so on and so forth. Because some companies won't hire leaders external. They
Mm.
like to have them grown within. You can't grow them within if you don't have them coming into the organization at lower levels.
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
going
that
back to
little
the question,
point is,
it is definitely the leader and not the size of the company.
yeah, that's interesting to hear that viewpoint because it doesn't matter if it's a 5-person organization, if it's a 500-person organization. So then, I think with our listeners, we would consider they may be listening to this and then they're asking themselves like, so how do I know if my company is like truly committed to D&I? Like how?
I love that question. I love that question. And you really have to research the company. You have to, like, let me give you an example, right? So before I go through roadblocks and challenges, as an employee, and you're looking at an organization, it is so important that you do your research. You see, if they have a CDO or they have some type of leader for DEI, how long have they been doing it? Where's their journey, right? Because really, with organizations, you have to go in and say, okay, if you look at the leadership, where are they on their journey? Because DEI is a very long journey. I know when I started as a CDO, our CEO said, it's a journey, Jen, so you got to be in it for the long haul. And it is, but on that journey, what type of goals do they have? What type of mission do they have? Like their mission statement. Is DEI a part of that mission statement? Is it a part of their values? Do you see DEI, represented in their senior leadership? Look at their website, pull up their executives. What do you see there? Do you see gender? Is it represent, does that look good to you for how many roles that are leadership roles? Then you look at, ethnicity. And I'm sure there are a lot of companies that provide representation and you can actually see it. There's companies when you start interviewing with them, they provide you with, diverse slate of interview panel. That's important, in your questions, because as you interview with companies, you're interviewing the company too, so ask some questions about their diversity programs, about what they're doing with diversity, about the representation. I was talking to a company the other day and we're talking about procurement. And it was a company that was looking at me for, a leadership role there, like a permanent role. And I started to talk about the women in their organization. I didn't see any women on the website. So talk to me about that. What are you guys doing about that? Are there any programs? How does a woman come into your organization and hit the ground running? Does she have a mentorship program? Is there anything that helps, in the organization for a woman? And then you go deeper and talk about your ethnicity, or if you're a parent, right? Or if you're a caregiver, talk about those things, what matters to you and what would make you be your authentic self matters in the interview. Don't wait till you get the job. Because it's too late, it's like, okay, I have the job, I'm gonna have to go try. And then you try it and, it's 50-50. So research it, when I think about, I'm gonna shift a little bit, but when I think about roadblocks and challenges, right? Because, when you said, hey, how do you know the company is committed, right? So many. So personally, I've come across a lot of challenges. First off, DEI, having a conversation about diversity, that's a day-to-day challenge for a leader, excuse me, because you have these conversations at work that, 5 years ago, you couldn't have these conversations. 5 years ago, I couldn't go to, a leader in the organization and talk about, hey, Jen, I know you're here for diversity, but I don't see that being an issue. Because when I look in the Zoom calls, I see enough colored faces, right? Or I have a conversation with a leader that is, a global leader that lives overseas, that reads books about, African American people in these novels that that you read as a child. And in those novels, the Black people are called Negroes. And having a conversation with a leader to say, hey, Jen, is it okay to use that? Can I use that? It's like, never.
Mm-hmm.
But you always have these conversations that are hard to have, right, with leaders in the organization on a daily basis. So with that, with that, you have to, like, it's so critical for you to ensure that you talk and really understand what, you know, what the company, where the company is in their journey, because they may not be as far along as you are, you know. And even as a leader, for me, for a company that I was leading, you know, some of the executives were right there with me. Some of the executives were ahead of me, and some of them had just started their journey. And we had to talk about why we're doing DEI, right? When I see so many, when I look in the town hall, you know, and it's like, yeah, but let me tell you why. Let's go through the why. And, you know, again, my big thing for me personally is my why. And when I'm speaking to people that have a different perspective, a different thought than I do, then I want to know their why. Because I really believe, like, you can learn from anywhere, you know. Just because you don't have the same thoughts or the same opinion, or you don't agree, doesn't mean that there's not a lesson in there, you know. And I, no pun to the name of the podcast. But
Thanks for saying that.
there's
We have our pullout quote for the
there
conversation.
you go, there you go.
I really liked what you said about starting, kind of coming from the middle, and how many people, you know, middle managers might hire versus how many people the C-suite might hire. And I think it's the same for how many people a middle manager might talk to in a given day versus how many people a CEO might talk to. And so I think you're right that a lot of the influence is coming from the middle. So knowing that, what kind of tools would you give those middle managers? You know, so like one thing that comes to mind is, like, I've been at companies where you would do interview training to help you with implicit bias, right? And that's really helpful. Then at the same time, I hear complaints from middle managers saying, I want to hire more, you know, BIPOC, but I'm not getting those resumes. So my pool of candidates, you know. So is there a way to address that? Or what other tools would you try to bring to an organization to help with that middle layer, to give them the ability to create change?
Yeah, so that's a great question, Jamie. And it's really all about education, right? So the middle managers, you know, in my past, we focused on training, right? Learning how to have inclusive mindset. What does that mean, right? And that inclusive mindset is a series of allyship. You know, there's so many things that happen in the world that people bring to work. You know, police brutality was a big thing, you know, and it's still a big thing, unfortunately, but it's a big thing. And some of that trauma that they see out in the world comes in. You know I live in Georgia, and when someone killed, you know, 8 Asian Americans in their place of work, that was traumatic. And you bring that into the company, you bring that to your, you know, you bring that with you, because you can't just leave it at the door. So how do we ensure that the middle managers can have conversations with employees in regards to those things, right? In regards to the trauma. No one's going to be a therapist, right? So how do we ensure that they have the right education, the right tools, in an effort to have those conversations, or to just at least be supportive of a conversation of that nature? So it's really important to educate, right? And it has to be like customized education of how to be inclusive, how to be an advocate for people that you are not a part of their community. That is so important. Like, how to be an ally. What does that look like? Are you a bad person if you're not an ally? You know, and those things need to be talked about as well, because you're not. You know, you may not know what an ally is, and you may be at the beginning of your journey. So you have to meet people where they are. You have to have mandatory training. That is something that I fought for in my entire CDO career, was mandatory training. And there's some companies that are not ready for that. They want to give, bias training or microaggressions, and they want to give you little sound bites and 5 minutes of this and 5 minutes of that. Does that really help? There's certain things in a day, you receive 100 emails. Do you remember all the emails you read? Probably not. Just the big bullets, the ones that you had to spend time on, the ones you had to really think about your response to that email. Those are the ones that you remember at night. So if we're giving you sound bites of DEI and trying to create an inclusive person to ensure that you're more intentional about how you interact, how you speak, how you show up and represent the company, we can't just give you sound bites. It should be something that is mandatory. If we're going to do compliance training, security training, code of conduct training manually, and that takes, oh my God, takes an hour to do. DEI should be just as important, and that's, again, going back to Carlos' question. Again, that's one of the questions you ask the new company. Do you have any DEI training? How am I going to be a better DEI person, supporter, advocate if I come to your company? What will you do for me? I want to make you accountable to make sure that I'm still, like, I'm growing and I understand. And as I grow into your organization as a leader, what type of training am I going to get so I can be the best leader that I can be? But also when it comes to DEI and those types of tools that are essential to be inclusive. So I would do the training. That is so important. And then the next thing for those leaders is for those spaces, like you said, Jamie, where, I'm not getting, resumes, I don't have a pipeline. That's another strategy and program that needs to be in place, because I hear that a lot, right? When my last position, I heard it, we don't have a good pipeline of diverse candidates. Why? Right? So are we still at a point for a company where we're just going to wait for people to apply and we hope and cross our fingers and pray that they're diverse and qualified? Because you have to be qualified, right? So we can't live like that. Some companies are not an Amazon. Amazon, how many people Google, I want to work at Amazon, or, or Google, or one of those types of brands, right? Until your company becomes a brand of that caliber, where you don't have to go find, this pipeline because they're looking for you, because that's the place to be, right? Then you have to have intentional programs that your recruiters are pushing to go to places that where the diverse talent is. You have to have some technology that helps you with a platform so you could source that type of caliber of candidates. You have to make sure that you have a retention program to help you once you get these people in and you finally found your diverse candidate. How do we keep them? Do you have a really good environment for them to be successful at? Will they walk into your company and they're able to continue to thrive and have a great career there? Or will they feel like they're isolated? Will they feel like they're, not a part of the team? Will they not see people that look like them? How do we keep the people there? So you have to have intentional programs at every point of the employee life cycle. And that's why, and that's another thing. You think about DEI, people think DEI should be in HR because it should be in all the different points of the employee life cycle, right? Seems like that's a good connector for DEI and HR, but really just because you need to be a part of those connectors doesn't need to be, you should be a part of HR, right? Because there's certain things that DEI, again, this is back to my thoughts, certain
Yeah.
things that DEI should be. And if you really come at it as something that is important, something that is a corporate goal, it's a part of your corporate, strategy, then it should be in its own world, right? Because in that space, then you're not a piece of compliance. DEI shouldn't be compliance. It should just be how you should be a part of life. It should be a part of the way you do business. As Carlos said, hey, it's not just gender and ethnicity, it's also a diverse way of thinking, right? It's a diverse place of where you live, right? So we haven't looked at the global aspect, especially being in a global company, that you're going to have diverse thoughts and diverse, perspectives and cultures and things like that. It's bigger than just gender and race.
Yeah. Well, I think that, you look back on any kind of discipline in a company, and it always took decades before there was a chief, blank officer. Like even a chief marketing officer wasn't always like a thing. So more and more companies do have CDOs, but it's not a given. Like you're saying, a lot of people tuck it under HR, and you're right. It seems like it needs its own world because it's a little bit bigger than that. But I love what you said about intentionality, because the organic nature of a company and how a company grows, they tend to attract like-minded people, or people that are maybe in the same, same race, same socioeconomic category. So there needs to be intentionality to break outside of that. So I think that's a great tip. Thank you.
It is. It is. And it's so important. It's like, it's one of those things that if you don't pay attention to the details, it's like you're painting a picture. And if you don't pay attention to the details, then the picture that you paint is not going to be very accurate of what you're trying to depict, And it's like DEI is one of those details of this painting of employees that you have in your, in your environment. And if you don't have it, then it's blurry, because you don't really understand and have the understanding of what's going on. One of the major things as a CDO, you have to understand if the company is ready for change. And like you said, all these titles and roles are changing, and they're adding to it. I saw, a chief, what was it? A chief direction officer, which I have no idea what that means, but it sounds pretty cool, right? I don't know what direction you could go in with that, but it sounds cool. But there's all these different roles, right? So when you think about like diversity, equity, and inclusion, and also social responsibility, we didn't talk about that piece of it, but it is so important to understand what's the company's appetite for change.
Yeah.
Because you're going to change, you're going to find out things that are going to be tough to hear. You're going to see that some of your programs that you had in place for years and years and years don't work. Are you going to be able to pivot? Are you going to be able to change it based on the data and the information that you get today? And that, my friends, is really hard for people to swallow, when you have that person that's been there for so long, they're like, oh no, we do it like this. We've been doing it like this forever. Well, we have to stop. And if you want to really improve and impact, the greatest value, then everything should be on the table. You cannot do what you did, 10 years ago, even today, 5 years, 2 years ago. Everything needs to be enhanced, adjusted, in an effort to make sure you're doing the right thing for the company.
Yeah.
Not
And it is a long, you used the word business transformation earlier. It is a transformation, and any sort of transformation journey, unfortunately, like, or what, if you want to be neutral about it, you need to show quick wins, right?
Yes.
And the D&I journey is years long, and if management changes or something happens with the company, hard times, right? It's a business, right? The economy goes up and down, and if it's a hard time, then all of a sudden you start seeing the money dry up, and you really do see, like, is this an important goal for the company? And a lot of times showing the quick wins helps sustain the long-term effort. So Jen, I can't believe the time has flown by, and I still have 1,000 questions. Okay. But anything to say, like, in conclusion, or a final tip, or anything that you feel like you didn't get to tell our listeners?
Yeah, it did go by really fast, and I actually have enjoyed this conversation with you guys so much. I forgot about the listeners and forgot that I was supposed to be making points to for them to put in their
You
pocket and
made a
take
ton
with
of
them.
great points. You just
Yeah, exactly. Some
actually made
great
a ton of great.
lessons learned.
Yeah.
Yes, yes. Well, I just want to say that, there's so many different reasons um, to want to be a part of DEI, to want to lead DEI. Just as a person, understand your why, understand why you want to do it, understand what motivates you. I know with my experience as a CDO, it was the most challenging experience I've had to date, but it was also the most rewarding experience I had to date. Like, I am forever thankful and grateful that I had the opportunity to lead an organization into something that was the unknown,
Yeah.
and I was able to build a strategy and see things and build programs and ERGs and things like that that are still going on to this day because it was built the right way, and it was built with care. Care is a big part of being a CDO, and care is a big part of being an advocate or an ally. Understand those buzzwords. Those buzzwords are new, and what is this allyship? It's important, and you don't have to be at the level of the person sitting next to you. You can stay at your own level, at your own pace. Make sure you're at a company that's going to continue to feed you, give you education, give you opportunity to understand DEI, the programs, the different ways of being a part of it. You just really need to understand that piece of it, because I think it's important. It's important as an employee. It's important as a leader. So I'll end at that, but just want you to know that, it's a journey. It's a journey. It's not a destination. And building DEI strategies, it's not about success or failure or precision. It's really about the progress in taking steps forward.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah. Great advice. It was brave what you did. I think the risk that you took, and, hearing about your personal why, I think was wonderful and makes sense. And the work was the work, and it doesn't matter, it's good work, had an impact. All right. Well, thanks for joining us. I love this conversation, and I appreciate you taking the time. And thanks everybody for listening.
Yes,
Thank you, Jennifer.
Thank you.
Bye
Thank you
now.
so much. Bye now.